Okay, hello. We're going to tackle the 90-word question today, which is the last and most difficult question on the foundation tier AQA GCSE French writing paper. It is also the question 1, the easiest question on the higher tier paper. So whichever tier you do, you are going to need to know the tricks and tips to score well in this particular question. And we start off really by looking at the layout of the question, which is always 4 bullet points to answer in about 90 words, but you're not penalized if you go beyond 90 words. You can write more than that, but if you write much less, you're not going to have given enough information to hit the top end of the mark scheme. There is always a choice of 2, so you'll see this one is labelled 4.1, so this is off the foundation tier paper. So it's question 4, but it would be 1.1 on the higher tier paper, and there will be a 4.2 or a 1.2 to go with it. And your first decision is to choose your question. The first thing you've got to do is to make the decision as to which one you're going to answer. And I suppose the big mistake to make is to just pick the topic that you like the best. So this might be up against a question on holidays, and you might think, oh yes, I know lots about holidays. We spent ages in class learning about holidays, so I'll choose that one, and you discount this one. You get into writing your answer on holidays, and then you hit a bullet point that you're not too sure about, and you have a guess. And that costs you a lot of marks. The way to make the decision is to choose the question whose bullet points you are more confident about understanding what you're being asked to write. Because if you misunderstand the bullet points and don't mention them, it will cause big problems with your mark, as we'll see when we look at the mark scheme. So the first line, you don't really need to know what the first line means, but it can be helpful to spot the topic. So if you recognize the word santé, health, then that will give you a clue to help you work out the other 4 bullet points. So the first one's very easy because of opinion and fast food cognates. Watch out for these, votre and vos. They come up a lot in the bullet points, as does vous. Because they mean, votre and vos mean your, and vous means you when you're being polite to somebody. So you don't want to repeat these in your answer, and don't be put off by them either. It's just saying you need to talk about je, talk about I. So your opinion on fast food, your activities. Now, pour garder la forme means to keep fit, but if you didn't really know that, activité, as long as you know that you're writing about health, you could write something sensible there. And then you need to look out for time frames as well, because you will for certain have one of these 4 bullet points will be asking you something about the past, and one of them will be asking you about the future. So you need to look out for those. There's nothing in that bullet point or this one that suggests it's about the past or the future, so we know these 2 are going to be those. And they don't always come last. Sometimes the first bullet point can ask you about the past tense. You need to look out for the indicators. So you've got the accent there on manger, which might give it away, and the vous avez, part of the verb avoir, so you've got that past tense, you have eaten, vous avez mangé, but you might just spot the accent and think that's past tense. Or, more obvious, if you know some time phrases, récemment, recently, is a big clue that's your past tense. So, manger récemment, eaten recently. What have you eaten recently? You can work that out just from those 2 words. You don't really need to know the what you have. Just see eaten and recently and you'll be all right. What I would do on the exam paper is I would write the word past next to that so that I am reminded when I come to write that. Because at this moment I'm just thinking about the question and I'm making sure I understand the bullet points before I write anything, and that's really important. So this one I know already is going to be in the future because I haven't had a future tense yet, but the indicator is here, à l'avenir, in the future. Really need to know in the future, or dans le passé, in the past. Things that are time phrases showing you the tense are really important for spotting that. Or you might recognize the vous voudriez, which is the vous form, the you form of je voudrais, I would like. So might use that in my answer. So a sport, cognate, sport, future. That's all I need to understand. I need to write about a sport I'm going to do in the future. It does mean a sport which you would like to try in the future. But as long as I've got sport and in the future, I'll have answered the question. And let us just realise how important it is then to do these things, because we've got 16 marks, 10 for content and 6 for the language you use. And these are the 4 things you really need to try and include and do when you write any 90-word question, because the layout is always the same. There's 4 bullet points and you need to answer them all. You must include opinions. Now, this question asks for your opinion, but some of them might not, or it might be a little bit more subtle. So do make sure you put plenty of opinions in your work, and I'll show you on the mark scheme why. Time frames, you must include the past and the future as well as the present. So that's because the bullet points are asking you for it, but it's also because it's in the mark scheme. And then you're also looking for a little bit of variety in your vocabulary and a little bit of complexity in your language. Okay, so if we look at the mark scheme very quickly, here's the marks for content, and you can see that it says communication is clear. So far more important about complex than complexity is that you're clear, that you're not making errors, that means that we don't know what you're trying to say. Because the content mark, there are more marks for content than there are for language. So it's most important that it's understandable and that you answer all aspects of the task. And you can see here the little table at the bottom showing you that if you miss a bullet point off, if you only mention 3 of them, the highest score you can get for language is 6 marks. Okay, that doesn't mean that if you mention 4 bullet points, you will automatically get 7. If you mention 4 bullet points and then write another 80 words of nonsense, then you won't. But you must mention all 4 bullet points for 7 to 10 marks. You can't get those marks without them. So going down from 10 to 6 immediately, just because you've missed a bullet point out, is quite significant. And then if you look at the fact that opinions are mentioned in the content mark as well, opinions are expressed. Opinions are expressed. An opinion is expressed. So if you only mention one opinion, if you only have one opinion in the whole piece of writing, the maximum again you can score for content is 6, which is a big chunk of the marks percentage-wise. And look, if you don't have any opinions at all, you can only score 2 out of 10, whatever the quality of the rest of it is. So that's quite serious. You must have an opinion for 3 marks. So opinions and answer all of the bullet points. Those are the standout lessons we need to learn from the content mark scheme. If we look at the quality of language mark scheme, it looks very wordy, but if we highlight the important bits, there are references to 3 time frames which are largely successful. So we need to make sure we include references to the past and the future, and that if we do that several times, that the majority of the time they are accurate. We can make errors, but we don't want them all to be wrong. If you get 1 past tense in there and then 75 that are wrong, probably not going to get 5 marks for quality of language, because the errors are mainly minor, but you can have some more serious errors in complex language. And it does refer to complex language, complex structures, and a variety of vocabulary at the top here as well. But that needn't worry us too much, because complex doesn't have to mean ultra difficult. And I've put over here some examples of complex language in French. So just connectives, using words like because, however, but, when, therefore. Any of our normal connectives that we use in lessons are good for that. Negatives, I'm sure we know how to use ne and pas. That's different from English, and anything where it's different from English is probably a complex structure. Words like very and quite, très and assez, they're not difficult, but they are classed as complex structures. And comparatives as well, saying something is more fun than something else, more interesting than something else, with plus, que, that's a complex structure, but something that we may have seen in year 7. And any structure where we need an infinitive, so the ER, IR, or RE form of the verb, so things like I want, you can, I would like, any of those, je voudrais, je veux, on peut, anything where you need an infinitive afterwards, even j'aime, I like, j'aime jouer, I like to play. That's technically an infinitive structure and therefore an example of complex language. But obviously, there might be more difficult things that fit into that category as well. But that's just to give you an idea of some of the things that we might be able to include that are complex but are not that difficult. So when we come to do our revision, what this tells us is that we need to really give a lot of time to opinions. Make sure we've got plenty of adjectives to use to go after the parce que c'est. So words like fun, great, exciting, relaxing, boring, rubbish, awful, expensive, dangerous, tiring, anything like that that can help give us a bit of variety rather than just saying everything is ennuyeux or everything is super. We need to make sure we know how to talk in the future and in the past, particularly the past where there are a few irregulars that can trip us up. And then time phrases are really important, because if our tense goes wrong and we end up with the wrong tense in one of these bullet points, we can still get the content mark. We can still get the bullet point ticked if it's in the wrong tense. If we've got a time phrase like yesterday or last weekend, or even take it from the question. If you say something for this bullet point like, I eat a sandwich, then it's not successfully saying what you recently ate. But if you say recently I eat a sandwich and get the verb wrong instead of I ate, then you can get that bullet point ticked off as having been completed. Because you've said recently, it's clear that you're talking about the past. So using a time phrase in the past and the future bullet points is strongly recommended. Okay, so let's move on then and look at what we could possibly say to answer these bullet points in the next part of this video. So you need to find part 2 of this video to have a look at what I might write.